The sun had barely risen over the quiet streets of Maplewood, yet the grand house at the corner already hummed with activity. Inside, HOA President Daniel Whitmore walked through his morning routine, his mind occupied with meetings, complaints from neighbors, and the endless responsibility of maintaining appearances. Daniel was a man who seemed to have it all: a respected position, a beautiful home, and a carefully curated image of perfection. Yet beneath the polished exterior, a gnawing emptiness had begun to settle in, one that no accomplishment or title could fill. It was early when the new house worker, a middle-aged man named Thomas, arrived for the first day. Thomas was quiet, unassuming, with hands that bore the calluses of a lifetime of labor. His eyes held a depth Daniel couldn't immediately place, a strange familiarity he instinctively felt but couldn't define. Thomas carried himself with a subtle dignity, moving with a meticulous care that suggested pride in his work. Daniel observed him for a moment, a faint twinge of discomfort stirring somewhere deep in his chest. "Good morning, sir," Thomas said softly, setting down a toolbox by the kitchen counter. His voice was calm, steady, but carried a tone that felt strangely intimate, as though he were speaking to someone he had known far longer than just a few minutes. Daniel nodded, offering the curt, practiced politeness he reserved for all his employees. "Morning, you'll be helping around the house. Laundry, cleaning, minor repairs, you understand." Thomas simply nodded, his gaze briefly meeting Daniel before he turned to his tasks. There was nothing extraordinary about him, and yet Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something about him stirred memories he didn't even know he had. Days passed, and Thomas worked with a quiet efficiency that impressed Daniel, though it also unnerved him. There was an instinctive precision to the way Thomas handled the household, folding clothes, polishing furniture, even cooking meals in a manner that seemed instinctively familiar. It was almost as if he knew not just the home but its rhythms, its small, invisible secrets. Daniel found himself watching Thomas more than necessary, a strange tension simmering in his chest. One afternoon, Daniel was in the study when Thomas quietly entered with a tray of tea. He placed it down on the polished oak table and met Daniel's gaze, offering a faint smile. "You always liked it strong," Thomas said. Daniel froze. The words were simple, yet there was an odd intimacy in them that made the hair on his arms stand on end. He had never mentioned this to anyone. Yes, thank you," he stammered, a slight edge creeping into his voice. Thomas nodded and retreated, leaving Daniel alone with his thoughts. Something about Thomas's presence felt like a key to a door Daniel didn't even realize existed, a door that held memories long buried under years of ambition and suppression. That night Daniel couldn't sleep. He found himself replaying Thomas's every gesture, every word, every quiet glance. The familiarity was maddening, like a melody he had heard in childhood but had forgotten over time. He began to notice small things: the way Thomas's hands moved as he handled objects, the faint scent of cologne that reminded him of someone he had loved and lost, the way Thomas paused occasionally, as if listening to an invisible whisper from the past. Days turned into a week, and the house seemed to breathe with Thomas's presence. Neighbors noticed the change too, how Daniel's usually tense demeanor softened slightly, how he occasionally lingered in the kitchen watching Thomas work, a faint, wistful smile on his face. Yet Daniel remained oblivious to the true weight of the unease growing in his own chest. One evening, as a storm rolled across Maplewood, Daniel stayed late in his office reviewing HOA reports when he heard a faint knock on the door. He looked up to see Thomas standing there, drenched from the rain, holding a small package. "Sir, I thought you might need this," Thomas said softly, placing the package on the desk. Daniel looked down at it, puzzled. Inside was a stack of old photographs, yellowed with age, tied together with a fraying ribbon. He lifted one carefully and froze. The photograph was of a younger Daniel, no older than 10, sitting on the front steps of the same house. Next to him was a man broad-shouldered with a warm, gentle smile holding a small toolbox. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The man in the photo was unmistakably Thomas. Where did you get these?" Daniel whispered, his voice trembling. Thomas didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step closer, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and resignation. "Daniel, it's time you knew the truth." Daniel's mind raced, a storm of confusion and disbelief overtaking him. What do you mean?" Thomas let out a slow, heavy sigh. "I am your father." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. Daniel's knees nearly buckled. He stared at Thomas, searching for some hint that this was a joke, a mistake, a hallucination, but there was none. Only the same quiet dignity, the same eyes that seemed achingly familiar. No, that can't be, Daniel whispered, shaking his head. You're just the house worker, you can't be. Thomas shook his head slowly. I know it's hard to understand. I wasn't part of your life when you were growing up. I couldn't be. Circumstances, they kept us apart, but I've always watched over you, always. Daniel felt a tidal wave of emotions crashing over him: disbelief, anger, confusion, longing. He had spent his entire life believing his father had abandoned him, that he had been alone. And now, standing in front of him was the man who had quietly been present in his life all along, hidden in plain sight. Why now? Daniel asked, his voice breaking. Why didn't you say anything? Thomas's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Because I was afraid you wouldn't forgive me, afraid I would only bring more pain. I came as a worker to be close to you, to make sure you were safe, to be part of your life in any way I could. I didn't want to force myself into a role you weren't ready for. Daniel sank into his chair, his hands trembling as he clutched the photographs. Each image was a dagger and a balm at once, revealing moments of life he thought had been lost, showing the love he had always craved. I don't know what to say, Daniel whispered. His voice was barely audible over the rain beating against the windows. I spent my whole life alone. I blamed myself. I hated him, my father, for leaving me, and now it was you all this time. Thomas knelt beside him, placing a hand over Daniel. I never stopped loving you, Daniel. Even when I couldn't be there, I never stopped caring. I know it doesn't erase the years, but maybe we can start now. Daniel felt tears streaming down his face, unbidden and overwhelming. The anger, the loneliness, the longing all collided in a storm of emotion he had carried for decades. I don't know if I can forgive, he admitted. But I need you, I need to know you, I need to understand why. Thomas nodded, his own tears falling freely now. And I will tell you everything. I'll answer every question, explain every absence. Please don't shut me out again. The rain outside intensified, as if echoing the storm of emotions inside the grand house. Daniel looked at Thomas, this man who had lived in the shadows of his life, and for the first time he allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to reclaim the bond he had lost. That night Daniel barely slept. He kept the photographs close, tracing the faces with trembling fingers, trying to reconcile the past with the present. Thomas worked quietly in the kitchen, cleaning, cooking, and moving through the house with the same meticulous care he always had. Yet tonight everything felt different. The air was charged with a new understanding, a fragile, tentative connection that neither man could yet fully articulate. As dawn approached, Daniel finally allowed himself to confront the truth he had spent a lifetime avoiding. He wasn't alone anymore. His father, the man he had mourned and resented in equal measure, was here. He had been here all along, hiding in plain sight, loving him silently, waiting for the moment when they could finally face the truth together. And as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the windows, illuminating the house in a golden glow, Daniel realized that life, in all its messy, painful, and beautiful complexity, had given him a second chance. A chance to heal, to understand, and to finally embrace the father he had thought he had lost forever. But even as hope stirred in his chest, a lingering question remained. How had Thomas chosen to reveal himself now, and what secrets still lay hidden, buried in the years they had lost? The answer, Daniel knew, was waiting, just beyond the next moment, in the fragile, heart-wrenching days to come. The days that followed were unlike anything Daniel had ever experienced. The house felt alive in a way it hadn't before, charged with a mixture of anticipation, fear, and the fragile hope of rediscovered family. Every time Thomas moved through the rooms, Daniel's heart ached and swelled simultaneously. He couldn't help but watch him, marveling at how familiar every gesture seemed, how natural it was for Thomas to belong in the spaces he had only ever called his own. Yet beneath the comfort, a tension lingered. Daniel's mind kept returning to the questions he couldn't yet voice. Why had Thomas hidden himself all these years? What had he endured to stay away? And most importantly, why now? Why reveal himself after so long? Each unanswered question gnawed at Daniel, a persistent itch he could neither scratch nor ignore. One evening, after the sun had dipped below the horizon and the house was quiet save for the soft hum of the refrigerator, Daniel found himself standing in the kitchen watching Thomas prepare dinner. The older man moved with a quiet grace, slicing vegetables and stirring sauces with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. You've always known how to do this," Daniel said softly, breaking the silence. Thomas glanced at him, his eyes meeting Daniel with a depth that sent shivers down his spine. "It's something your mother taught me. I promised her I'd take care of you no matter what, even if it meant staying in the shadows." Daniel's chest tightened. His mother had been a shadowy figure in his life, a presence more felt than seen, leaving Daniel with a void that had defined most of his childhood. To hear Thomas speak of her, to feel that connection, was overwhelming. I didn't know she trusted anyone. I didn't know she trusted you." Thomas smiled faintly, though the expression didn't reach the sadness in his eyes. "She trusted me with you, that was enough. She wanted you to be safe, to grow, to live your life without burdening you with truths you weren't ready to hear. I was just the guardian she never allowed you to see." Daniel sank into a chair, his mind spinning with the implications. For years he had carried resentment and sorrow, blaming fate for leaving him fatherless. And yet here was Thomas, offering not just explanation but the love he had longed for all his life. The mixture of relief and pain was almost too much to bear. Why did you never tell me anything?" Daniel asked, his voice breaking. "Even when I was a teenager, even when I needed a father." Thomas paused, setting down the knife carefully. He wiped his hands on a towel before sitting across from Daniel. "Because I feared it would destroy you. I feared that the anger, the betrayal would be too much. I thought it better to be close in silence than absent in truth. I thought you might hate me forever." Daniel's hands trembled as he reached across the table. I don't hate you, but I don't know if I can forgive either. I don't know how to feel right now." Thomas's eyes glistened. "You don't have to feel anything yet. You just have to know that I am here, that I am yours, and I have never stopped caring. Everything else we can work through together." That night sleep eluded Daniel. Memories long buried clawed their way to the surface. Moments from his childhood when he had imagined his father watching over him, the empty chair at family dinners, the ache in his chest when other children spoke of their fathers. All of it converged with the present, with Thomas now sitting quietly in the living room, reading a book by the soft glow of a lamp, so ordinary and yet impossibly significant. The following morning, Daniel awoke with a determination he hadn't felt in years. He needed to understand Thomas's life, the choices that had kept him away, and the sacrifices that had been made in silence. Over breakfast, he cautiously began to ask questions, and Thomas, though hesitant at first, gradually began to unravel the threads of a story that Daniel could barely comprehend. Thomas had lived a life of hardship and secrecy, moving from town to town, always careful to stay on the periphery of Daniel's life. There had been times when he had wanted to reach out to speak, but circumstances, financial, emotional, and societal, had kept him from doing so. He had endured loneliness, longing, and frustration, all in the name of protecting Daniel from truths he wasn't ready to hear. Daniel listened, absorbing every word, feeling a strange combination of admiration and sorrow. The man sitting across from him had suffered silently, had borne a lifetime of sacrifice, and had chosen to protect his son rather than assert his own needs. The realization was humbling, heart-wrenching, and overwhelming. As the days passed, Daniel began to notice more subtle things about Thomas. The way he hummed softly while working, a tune Daniel vaguely recognized from his childhood. The way he paused when Daniel entered a room, as if waiting for permission to step fully into his life. The way he handled every task with meticulous care, as though each small act was a form of penance and devotion. One afternoon, Daniel followed Thomas into the garden where he had been tending to the flower beds. Thomas was kneeling in the soil, hands caked with dirt, planting new blooms for the upcoming season. Daniel watched quietly, the weight of emotions pressing down on him. You've always done this, haven't you?" Daniel asked softly, "even when I wasn't here." Thomas looked up, his eyes meeting Daniel's. "Yes, even when I wasn't allowed to be part of your life, I found ways to care from a distance. Every decision I made, every move I took, it was with you in mind." Daniel felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He had spent so many years angry, so many nights feeling abandoned, and yet here was a man who had loved him unconditionally, quietly, and sacrificially. I don't know what to say," he whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Thomas replied gently. "You just have to let me be here, let me try to make up for lost time in whatever small ways I can." The storm of emotions within Daniel was relentless. He wanted to scream, to cry, to embrace, to push away, all at once. And yet, amidst the turmoil, a fragile sense of peace began to take root. He realized that forgiveness was not immediate, nor was understanding, but recognition of love, even delayed, was the first step toward healing. That evening, Daniel found himself alone in his study, sifting through more photographs Thomas had brought. Each image revealed fragments of the past, Daniel as a child, moments frozen in time with a man he had thought absent. And with each photograph, each detail, each memory, Daniel felt a piece of himself reconnecting with something he had long thought lost. Suddenly, a letter slipped from one of the photo stacks. It was old, yellowed with age, and addressed to Daniel in handwriting he didn't recognize at first. The letter read simply, "To my son, one day you will understand why I had to stay away. Please forgive me and know that I love you always." Daniel's hands shook as he read the words, tears streaming freely now. The letter, Thomas explained, had been written by his mother on her deathbed, with the hope that one day Daniel would uncover the truth. It was a final act of love and reconciliation, a bridge spanning decades of silence and absence. Daniel folded the letter carefully, holding it to his chest as if it were a lifeline. I think I understand now," he whispered. "I think I finally understand why you stayed away, and I think I want to forgive. I don't know if I can yet, fully, but I want to try." Thomas reached across the table, his hand covering Daniel. "That's all I ask, one step at a time. We'll face the past together and we'll build a future where we don't have to hide from each other anymore." The bond between them began to grow, tentative yet undeniable. Days were spent in conversation, in silence, in shared meals and quiet moments of observation. Every story Thomas told, every memory Daniel recalled, stitched together fragments of a life interrupted by circumstance but now reclaiming its continuity. But even as they began to navigate this fragile reconnection, an undercurrent of tension lingered. There were details, small but significant, that Thomas had yet to reveal. Decisions he had made, sacrifices he had kept secret, and the full depth of the reasons for his absence were still shrouded in mystery. Daniel sensed it, a shadow just beyond the reach of understanding, a truth waiting to emerge. One night, Daniel confronted Thomas gently, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the room. "There's more, isn't there?" he asked. "I can feel it, something you're not telling me yet." Thomas's gaze fell, heavy with unspoken pain. "Yes, there is more, things I've hidden to protect you, things that may change how you see me, how you see us." Daniel's heart tightened. "Whatever it is, I need to know. I can't keep living in half-truths anymore, not after finding you." Thomas nodded, a mixture of relief and sorrow in his eyes. "Then one day soon I will tell you everything. Every choice, every sacrifice, every moment I stayed away for your sake. You deserve the full truth, Daniel, and you will have it. But for now, I need you to trust me." Daniel swallowed hard, feeling the weight of emotions and the enormity of what was to come. He realized that the journey of forgiveness and understanding was just beginning. The road ahead would be painful, filled with revelations that could shatter the fragile peace they had begun to build. And yet, he also knew that the chance to reclaim his father, to finally embrace the man who had loved him from the shadows, was worth every moment of uncertainty. And as the night stretched on, Daniel and Thomas sat together in the quiet house, a fragile sense of connection threading its way through the spaces that had long been empty. Outside, the world continued its indifferent march, but inside, two hearts cautiously began to mend, one story at a time. But even as Daniel felt hope stirring, he couldn't shake a nagging thought. The truths Thomas had yet to reveal, were they simply explanations, or did they hold secrets that might change everything? The answer, he knew, was waiting, just beyond the fragile dawn of their new beginning. The days that followed were both tender and tense. Daniel tried to navigate the strange new reality, a father who had been a stranger for decades suddenly present in every corner of his life. He found himself watching Thomas with a mixture of awe and hesitation, as though approaching a fragile relic too precious to touch carelessly. And Thomas, ever careful, seemed to mirror that same cautious reverence, never overstepping, never forcing a bond, yet always remaining close enough to be felt. One rainy afternoon, Daniel sat in the living room, a stack of photographs spread across the table. He traced the faces with trembling fingers, reliving memories he hadn't known were his, trying to reconcile the images with the man now standing before him. Thomas entered quietly, holding a cup of tea. "You're quiet today," Thomas said softly, his voice a gentle presence in the otherwise still room. "I'm trying to piece it all together," Daniel replied. "Everything you've told me, every photo, it's too much to absorb at once." Thomas nodded, setting the cup down. "I understand, the truth is heavy and I never wanted it to fall on you all at once, but I can't hide it any longer. You deserve to know why I stayed away and why I've been here in silence for so long." Daniel's heart tightened, I'm ready, he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he truly was. Thomas took a deep breath, his eyes clouded with memories and regrets. When your mother and we had to separate, circumstances forced me into hiding. I had enemies I couldn't confront, debts I couldn't pay, and choices I had to make to ensure your safety. Leaving you was the hardest decision of my life, but staying would have put you at risk. I thought being near, even invisibly, was safer than being present in your life directly. Daniel felt a surge of emotions, disbelief, anger, sorrow, and an unexpected thread of understanding. Enemies, debts, what do you mean? Thomas hesitated as though weighing how much to reveal. There were people who wanted to use me to manipulate our family. I had to disappear to ensure you were never caught in the crossfire, and your mother, she knew. She made me promise to stay away, to watch over you from a distance. That's why I became someone you wouldn't recognize, someone who could blend into the background without drawing attention. Daniel's breath caught, the depth of sacrifice, the years of silent torment, it was almost unbearable. All those years you were here, in this house, in this neighborhood. Thomas nodded slowly. I watched from afar. I learned your routines, your habits, your friends. I became your house worker because it was the only way I could be close without endangering you or forcing myself into your life prematurely. Every chore, every meal, every small act, it was my way of showing you love. Tears streamed down Daniel's face as the weight of decades-long misunderstanding and longing finally crashed over him. You sacrificed everything just to be near me. Yes, Thomas whispered, and I would do it all over again if it meant keeping you safe. For hours they spoke, peeling back layers of time and regret, revealing the truth behind every absence and every silent intervention. Daniel learned of Thomas's constant vigilance, the way he had paid off bills anonymously, the subtle ways he had prevented accidents, the quiet efforts to shape Daniel's life without ever stepping fully into it. Each revelation was a dagger and a balm, cutting through years of pain while simultaneously offering solace. Yet amidst the revelations, a shadow of unease remained. There were gaps, details Thomas had yet to explain, choices whose consequences Daniel could only guess at. The house seemed to hold its own breath as if waiting for the next confession, the next truth to emerge. That night, Daniel lay awake, haunted by a question that refused to leave him. If Thomas had been here all along, if he had truly been protecting him, then what had forced him into such secrecy? The answer hovered on the edge of revelation, a secret too heavy to disclose in a single breath. The following morning, Daniel decided he needed more than photographs and stories. He needed proof, tangible evidence that could anchor the overwhelming emotions threatening to engulf him. He ventured into the garage where Thomas kept old boxes and personal effects tucked away. Together, they sifted through decades of belongings, letters, documents, keepsakes, and mementos that traced the arc of Thomas's hidden life. Among the piles, Daniel found old letters addressed to him, some from his mother, some from Thomas himself, never sent, never delivered. Each letter revealed fragments of love and sorrow, glimpses of decisions made to protect him, and the profound regret of years spent apart. One envelope, sealed and trembling in Daniel's hands, contained a letter from Thomas written shortly after Daniel's 10th birthday. The words spoke of longing, of a father's love constrained by circumstance, and of the silent watch over a son who would never know his presence. Daniel's hands shook as he read, tears blurring the ink. I have always been here even when you could not see me, the letter read. Every choice I made, every sacrifice was for you. The emotional weight was almost too much. Daniel sank to the floor, clutching the letter, and Thomas knelt beside him, silent, offering comfort through presence alone. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, cautiously, Daniel began to adjust to the reality of having his father back. They shared meals, conversations, and moments of quiet reflection. Yet, Daniel couldn't ignore the nagging sense that Thomas was still holding back something, a truth even darker than the sacrifices he had already revealed. It was on a rainy evening, the sky dark and heavy, that Daniel confronted him. There's something you haven't told me, he said softly, though his voice trembled with urgency. I can feel it. There's a reason you stayed away that you haven't shared, something I need to know. Thomas's gaze fell, shadowed by pain and memory. Yes, he admitted. There is something I've kept hidden because I feared it would destroy you, destroy the fragile bond we've begun to rebuild. But you have a right to know, Daniel, you deserve the full truth. Daniel's heart pounded, a mix of fear and anticipation coiling in his chest. Then tell me, he whispered, I need to know everything. Thomas took a deep breath and his eyes glistened with tears. Years ago, before I could be a part of your life, I was forced to make a choice, one that cost me everything. There were men, dangerous men, who threatened your family, your life. To protect you, I had to disappear, but I also had to conceal certain actions, choices that may seem unforgivable now. I hope one day you can understand why I did what I did, even if it hurts to hear." Daniel swallowed hard. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. He had come seeking truth, and now it was here, raw and unfiltered, waiting to pierce through the fragile connection they had begun to forge. Thomas's voice shook as he continued. "I was forced into situations I never wanted. I had to negotiate, to make promises to dangerous men to keep you safe. I lied, I manipulated, I hid myself, all to protect you. Every act, no matter how painful or morally complicated, was done with one goal: keeping you alive, keeping you whole." Daniel felt his world tilt. The father he had finally found was also a man who had carried burdens unimaginable, whose moral compromises had been driven by love and desperation. The lines between right and wrong blurred, leaving only the raw human heart of sacrifice. Tears streamed down Daniel's face as he reached for Thomas's hands. I don't know how to process this," he whispered. "You've protected me all these years, but at what cost?" Thomas squeezed his hands gently. "At the cost of being your father in the way I always wanted. At the cost of being seen, being known, being loved openly by you. I carried the weight so you wouldn't have to, and now I am here, ready to bear it openly if you will let me." Daniel nodded slowly, the storm of emotion within him beginning to settle, leaving a fragile clarity. The road ahead would be long, filled with difficult conversations, unearthing painful truths, and navigating the consequences of past choices. But for the first time, Daniel felt the raw, unbreakable bond of a father's love, fierce and unyielding, even through years of absence and secrecy. And as they sat together in the quiet house, rain tapping against the windows, Daniel understood one undeniable truth: love, even when hidden and complicated, could bridge the deepest divides. But he also knew that the revelations Thomas had yet to share might shake the fragile foundation they had begun to build, and that the ultimate test of forgiveness and understanding was still to come. The following days were tense, yet filled with a quiet intimacy that Daniel had never known. He and Thomas moved carefully around each other, learning to share a life that had been denied to them for decades. They spoke openly, laughed quietly, and sometimes sat in silence, feeling the simple comfort of presence. And yet a shadow remained, unspoken but palpable: the secrets Thomas had promised to reveal, the truths that could either heal or shatter their fragile connection. One evening, Daniel finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been gnawing at him. They were in the study, the soft golden light of a lamp illuminating stacks of photographs and letters. Thomas sat across from him, hands folded, waiting. "I need to know everything," Daniel said, his voice steady but edged with emotion. "I need the full story, all of it, no more gaps, no more omissions. I can handle the truth, I need it." Thomas nodded slowly, his eyes heavy with both sorrow and relief. "You're right, you deserve nothing less, and it's time. Everything I've done, every decision I made, it all led to this moment." He began to recount the full story, a tale of sacrifice, danger, and love that Daniel could scarcely believe. Years ago, Thomas had been caught in a web of threats and schemes orchestrated by dangerous men who sought to exploit his family. These men had connections that reached into law enforcement, into business, into corners of society Daniel had never imagined. To protect Daniel, Thomas had been forced to disappear from his life completely. "I had no choice," Thomas said, his voice trembling. "I had to negotiate, to deceive, even to lie to people who would have harmed you if I hadn't. Every action I took, it was for you. And yet, in staying away, in hiding, I lost the chance to be your father in the way I had always dreamed." Daniel listened, heart pounding, as the pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place. He realized the depth of his father's sacrifice, the nights spent in fear, the constant vigilance, the invisible protection he had received without ever knowing it. And with that understanding came a tidal wave of emotion: sorrow for the years lost, gratitude for the love he had never known, and awe at the strength of a man who had carried so much alone. "But there's more," Thomas continued, a hint of anguish in his eyes. "When I came here as your house worker, I wasn't just seeking proximity. I was also ensuring that the people from my past could never find you. I had to live in the shadows, to blend in, to be invisible, so your life could remain safe and unthreatened. It was the only way I could finally be close to you without risking everything." Daniel's voice broke as he asked, "All these years you were here protecting me and I had no idea?" Thomas nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "Every day, every decision, every small act was for you. I carried the burden so you wouldn't have to, and now, after all these years, I finally have the chance to be your father openly, to rebuild what we lost." The weight of these revelations pressed down on Daniel, a mixture of sorrow, anger, and overwhelming love. He felt the years of resentment dissolve into understanding, the loneliness of childhood replaced by the presence of a father who had never truly left him. And yet, even in this moment of connection, he sensed the fragility of their new bond, aware that it had taken decades to reach this point and that the road ahead would not be easy. In the days that followed, Daniel and Thomas began to reconstruct their relationship piece by piece. They shared meals, worked together in the garden, and spent evenings recounting memories, both real and imagined, of the life they could have shared. Each story, each revelation was a step toward healing, a bridge spanning the chasm of years lost. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, Daniel stumbled upon an old box of letters and photographs Thomas had kept hidden. Inside were documents detailing the threats, the negotiations, and the sacrifices Thomas had made to protect him. Each letter was a testament to the depth of a father's love, the lengths he had gone to ensure Daniel's safety. Daniel sat on the dusty floor, tears streaming freely as Thomas knelt beside him, guiding him through each document. "I wanted you to have this when you were ready," Thomas said softly. "I didn't want to overwhelm you, but now you can see everything, the full extent of what I endured, all for you." Daniel held a letter in his hands, written by Thomas during a time when he had been forced to stay away. The words were filled with sorrow and longing, a father's love poured into ink. "I watch over you from afar, my son," it read. "Every choice I make, every sacrifice I endure is to keep you safe. One day I hope you will understand why I had to be absent and forgive me for the years I could not be your father." The emotions were too much to contain. Daniel collapsed into Thomas's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. The pain of years lost, the relief of truth, and the overwhelming love that had been hidden in the shadows all collided in a single, shattering moment. Thomas held him tightly, whispering words of comfort, letting the tears flow without judgment, without fear, without reservation. In that embrace, Daniel finally understood the magnitude of his father's sacrifice. He realized that love, even when hidden, could endure unimaginable trials, and that forgiveness, though difficult, was a path to healing both past and present wounds. As days turned into weeks, Daniel and Thomas continued to rebuild their lives together. The house, once a place of routine and isolation, became a home filled with laughter, conversation, and the quiet comfort of shared history. Neighbors noticed the change, the warmth in Daniel's demeanor, the easy companionship between father and son, and the unspoken bond that seemed to radiate from the very walls of the house. Yet even as they embraced this new chapter, a lingering question remained. Could the past ever be fully reconciled with the present? Could Daniel truly forgive all the years of absence, all the hidden truths, and all the sacrifices made in silence? One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Daniel spoke quietly. "I still feel the weight of everything you've told me. The sacrifices, the danger, the secrets, it's a lot to carry, but I want to try. I want us to move forward together as father and son." Thomas smiled, tears glistening in his eyes. "That's all I've ever wanted, Daniel. One step at a time, we'll heal, we'll rebuild, and we'll reclaim the years we lost. It won't be easy, but it will be ours." The sun set, casting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, illuminating the two men sitting side by side, bound by love, sacrifice, and the resilience of the human heart. In that moment, Daniel understood that family was not defined by years spent together or by absence, but by the enduring presence of love, even when hidden in shadows. And as night fell over the quiet streets of Maplewood, Daniel and Thomas embraced the fragile, heart-wrenching truth of their story. That love, no matter how delayed, no matter how complicated, could endure, heal, and transform even the deepest wounds. For the first time in decades, Daniel felt whole, and though the past could never be erased, the future, he realized, was theirs to shape together.